All right, so let's go ahead. We're going to start 7-7, which is all about something called simple interest. And in the book, they actually do something called compound interest. But because this is probably the first time that you've worked with interest, finding interest, we're just going to do simple. But honestly, compound is the one that's more common. And we'll talk about what it is, but we won't actually find it. Does anybody know what interest has to do with when you think of it, like in math class, or maybe just in general? I mean, because it's not all. It's really an application of math in our real world. Anna?
Well, when you think about it, like the bank, if you put like $1,000 in every month, you get a penny.
Okay, so depending on what that interest rate is, yes. So if you put money in a savings account, they give you a tiny little percent because you're letting them use your money. But where else can you earn interest? So that's earning a small little interest rate. Where else, Jules?
Like, maybe like if you worked at a grocery store but you bought groceries at the grocery store, then you're like, I don't know, like you're making money at the grocery store, but at the same time you're like losing money at the grocery store. I don't know.
No, that would be, I mean, you would pay like sales tax, and we've talked about that. That's a percent of something going
up. Isn't like interest like the amount of percent something goes up, like increases?
Yes, and it depends on which side of things you're looking at in terms of, yes, but it will make it go up. Yes, but it's a specific, so we talked about putting your money in a bank. Where else could you put your money and earn interest? Abby?
Stock?
Definitely. That's the other extreme. That's much higher percentage that you can make by investing in the stock market. Some of you might have done, maybe you're in the stock market challenge. Is that what Miss Riley's elective is called? Or if you've done Millionaire, you've heard about interest. So, but when you put your money in the stock market, you have a much higher percentage of interest. Does anybody know why you get more in the stock market than versus just putting it in a savings account? Evan?
Well, for one, like the stock market the stock will generally change every day from like ranging from like 0.2 to like sometimes it's like 200%, and it goes from like being a $60 stock to like a $200 stock.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really weird, and we wish we invested in it in our team.
Oh, really? So you actually saw that happen?
Yeah, that happened a couple times.
Did you see any that dropped drastically?
Yeah, that happens a lot too. Like once Netflix was down 20%, it
Okay.
dropped like $200, not 200, like $20 or something like that. A lot of money.
Okay. Yeah. So the point is, though, it changes. It can go really high. It can go really low. It can stay in the middle, but there's more risk involved. You're not guaranteed that your stock is going to go up. It could drop really low, and you could lose money. So because there's more risk, you have the potential to earn more interest. But with the bank, it's pretty certain you're going to, if you want to go get your money out, your money's going to be there. And you know it'll always be this tiny little percent of increase. And then there's things in the middle. Have you thought of something, Jules?
Yeah, like at horse races, people like invest in like a specific horse.
I don't know that I'd call that interest.
Like,
that's more just gambling.
I'm like a company, like if like the like when you invest in like a company.
Yeah,
like
which would be yes, and that's kind of like stocks, really. That's a similar. There's things called a savings bond. Have you heard of things like that? Maybe some of your grandparents might have given you one, and that earns a little bit more interest than a savings account. So those are where you earn. Where would you have to pay interest to someone else? Because you earn it if you say, okay, I'm going to let you use my money, and they say, okay, and we'll give you this percent of interest, depending on where you're investing. But where would you maybe say, okay, I need to use money, so I'm going to pay interest. Instead of earning it, it's the other side. You're going to have to pay it. Hayden. Okay, exactly. A loan. Maybe your parents have have you heard of a mortgage? And that's basically a loan to buy a house. Or maybe they take out a loan to do improvements on your house. Or what's another big purchase that everybody makes?
Car.
A car.
Like a big trip around like an else somewhere.
Yeah, maybe you take out a loan for something like that, a trip, but like home improvements, buying a house, a car.
An elephant.
Maybe you needed an elephant, you might take out a loan.
In the state of Florida, an elephant is considered an automobile
Well,
in
like-
terms of parking.
Like a parking meter. If you like
If you
park
parked an
your
elephant,
elephant, like,
you'd still need
longer,
to like.
then
Put the meter.
or it would, you would still get like a pack.
Okay, and they're probably expensive, so you might have to get a loan to buy one, right? Okay, so you would have a percent. So they're saying, okay, we'll let you use our money. The bank says, okay, you may use this money, but because we're letting you use it to buy this house or to buy this car, this elephant, then you're going to have to pay it back, but you also have to pay a percentage of what you borrowed, which is your interest. Where else would you, a bank you borrow money from, a big one that a lot of people get in trouble with.
Oh, so my little brother sometimes like if he's given money, he's not really good with keeping up with money. So he gives it to my dad like to hold on to, and then my dad knows how much you put in there, and then he'll just give back to him.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of funny, like if my dad has to borrow some of my little brother's money, he goes, well, you can borrow my money, but you have to give me like $5 extra if you're gonna borrow.
Which is the interest. Yes. Yeah, and you could, if your friends or your siblings say we'd like to borrow money, or parents, and you say, okay, but I would like to charge you 10% interest every day. So like if you let them borrow $10, what's 10% of $10? $1. So you could say every day, okay, you have to pay it back by Friday, but if I don't have it Friday, every day after that, you need to pay me 10%. And so every day after, it's like you charge them an extra $1. So that's an interest. But there's a really big one. Hannah?
Like if you put it on your credit card bill.
Yes. Or maybe not forget, but you just don't have the money. Maybe a lot of people get into trouble. And those of you in Millionaire, you know how Dave Ramsey talks about cutting up credit cards. So because people will put things on their credit cards, they charge it, but they don't really have the money to pay it. And so they'll just pay a little bit off. But then, and that's the interest rate there is like, a lot of them are 18%. So it's a huge amount that you have to pay back. So maybe you buy this cool jacket and then, but you don't really have the money for it. So then you don't pay it off for several months. So you might pay double for that jacket because of all the interest you had to pay because you didn't pay, so it's, that's a huge place where interest is. Ashna?
Well, like if you have like insurance and then you have to pay your bill to them, and then you don't pay it on time, then you have to pay a little.
That's true. You're right. So if you don't pay, and that's a little bit like a credit card in a way, but you're right. They've provided a service, and if you don't pay on time, then they charge you some interest. Yeah. It's a little different because that's almost like a fee because you didn't pay your bill, but it could be a similar. You'd find it the same way. So, yeah. Okay, last one. Katie?
Well, so we had 2 houses, and we rented to a college student, and one time he was late with his rent because he lost his job, so he had to pay like $5 for each night he was there.
Yes. So yeah, that's like not paying your bill, not paying your credit card. So you may have just said an amount of money, but it would have been a percentage. Good. Okay, so let's get a definition of interest. And a general definition is that it's the amount of money paid or earned. So you would pay the money if you take out a loan, and you have to pay back your loan, but you also have to pay interest. Or maybe you've invested your money, so you earn money back. Amount of money paid or earned for the use of money. Yes.
Like when you go to a restaurant and like you tip them,
Mm-hmm.
like on your bill, like is that kind of interest?
It's using percentages, but it's not really interest. Okay, but you're right. And we did that earlier in the chapter because that's like finding tax or tip. Yes. All right, so interest is a percentage that's added on. And we're going to focus on simple interest, and it'll be based on a year. So we'll say, okay, maybe we take out a loan and we say, okay, at the end of the year, I will pay this back, agreeing to pay a certain amount of yearly interest. And so let's begin with one. I want to see if you can figure out. Let's say that we have maybe we'll take out a loan for $1,000 because what might cost $1,000?
A new TV. A new TV.
A new TV.
Your elephant.
Okay, so let's say $1,000 for a new TV, and we will agree to pay 4.5% interest. So I want you to figure out how much money will you have to pay in interest. Okay, so go ahead and do that. How much, let's say that's a 4.5% yearly interest rate. So at the end of the year, how much money will you pay just in interest? Hayden, what'd you get?
$45.
Okay, $45. How'd you get that?
I just multiplied 1,000 by 0.045.
Okay, so you changed the percent to its decimal form, moved it back
That
two
was in
places. Good. It's 4.5% of 1,000. That's the interest. And what if I said, okay, so do you only, if you borrow $1,000, do you only have to pay him 45 back?
And
And
the 1,000.
the 1,000, right? So how much do you really owe?
1,000.
1,045. So it's the original amount that you borrowed plus your interest, and then you have to pay both of those things back. So this would be after 1 year. Well, what would you do? How much interest would there be let's say you said, I can't pay that back in a year. I'm going to I need 3 years. So how much interest would you pay in 3 years? How would you figure it out?
135.
Because what did you do? Okay, you take 1 year, you'd multiply it by 3, so then you'd have to pay 135. Okay, that's the amount of interest. Do you still have to pay back your 1,000?
Yes.
All right, so let's come up. Notice what we did to get from, we had this $1,000 that we borrowed. We have our yearly interest rate of 4.5, and then we have this 3 years. What did we do to use that information to get to this 135, the amount of interest? What did we do with all those numbers, Jules?
We multiplied the percent by how many years,
Mm-hmm.
and we added the initial cost.
But to find only the interest, did we do any adding?
No.
So what did we do with the 1,000, the 4.5%, and the 3? We really just multiplied them all together, right? Well, that's what you do. We're going to turn that into a formula for interest. And we're going to do a capital I for interest equals, and so we multiplied the 1,000. Well, there's a special name for that original amount of money that you either borrow or invest, and that's called principal. We'll write that down in a second, but we're going to do P for principal, and then we multiplied it by the yearly interest rate, so we're going to do R for rate, and then the 3 years, that was our what?
Years.
Number of years, so in general we would say that's our time. I like to do a little curl on the bottom of the T so it doesn't look like a plus. So let's label what each of these are. So this is our interest. P is the principal. And let's put a note here as well, kind of a definition, that principal is the amount of money invested or borrowed. Because you're going to use the same formula whether you're borrowing money or investing money. Okay, and then R, what did we say R is?
Freight rate.
Yes, and I'm going to put it's the yearly rate. And that just means this is a rate based on every year you would pay back a certain amount. And then we said T is, oh, and let's put a note here about the rate. What did we have to do to the rate before we multiplied?
Change it to a decimal.
Good. We need to change to a decimal. And then T is time. And it's important that we put that time is in years.
Is it always in years?
Yes, well that's how we're going to put it in, but if it's not in years, we need to adjust it so that it's a part of a year. And we're going to do an example of that. Okay, so let's try. Now this just gives us the interest. It doesn't give us the total amount that we might need to pay back or that we've earned. So what would the total, how would you find the total amount that you either have to pay back or that you now possess, like you've invested your money and that you now have? What would you do, Patrick?
Add it to your total.
Ex-
Add the interest.
exactly. So, well, add what to your,
The interest.
to the, use one of the words that we have up there in green.
Principal.
Okay, good. So the principal is the amount that you started with, the amount that you borrowed, the amount that you invested, and if you add the interest to that, then you will get your total. So let's put that down. That the total amount is your principal plus your interest. All right, so let's try another one. Let's say we have $2,500 at, maybe we're going to put this in the stock market, and we're going to invest that amount of money at a 6.75% yearly interest rate, and we'll do it for, we'll leave it in there for 6 years. So I want you to find the amount of interest that you would earn. So, and with this formula, I want you to write the formula down each time you work a problem. So you start out, I equals PRT, and then fill in the parts that you know. So Avery, what numbers did you type in your calculator?
I did $2,500 times 0.00675.
So like this? Okay. Mm-hmm.
And I got 125.
Okay, you're close. But what should the rate be when we change it, Ashna? It is a decimal, but how many places do I move the decimal back? You just yes. And so what you can do to your answer is bump your decimal back because you moved it one too many to the left, so move it back to the right one. So it should just be 0.0675 times 6. And then if we move that decimal on your answer over 1, it'd be 1,012.50. Do y'all see where we got that? Okay. All right, so let's do another one. And this time, we'll do maybe $4,000 at, let's do 5% interest for, let's do 4 months this time.
On the homework, do you want us to like rewrite that problem?
I'm okay if you just go ahead. As long as you write your formula and plug things in, that's okay. Okay, so we start out with our formula, I equals PRT. And the question would be, what is the interest? So we start out, our principal is how much? 4,000. Now what do I change the rate? 5% goes to 0.05. Now, how are months related to years? Because we need this time to be in years. Ashna? You could do a decimal or a fraction. I'm going to encourage you to do the fraction because some, like if I had 3 months, let's see, no, that wouldn't work. Let's say I have, well, even actually this one. Because what happens,
1/3.
and what's 1/3 as a decimal? That's the percent, but that's rounded. So 1/3 is 0.3 forever, right? 0.3 repeating, and that's, you can't really put in a repeating amount as a decimal into your calculator. So it would be rounded somewhat. So I'm going to show you an easy way to put it in your calculators. So but I like that you knew it's out of 12, or you said change it to a decimal, out of your 12 months. So 4 out of 12, that's how many months 4 is compared to a full year. So when you type it, do you remember when we did our conversions with our fractions and we talked about how to type it in? Any idea how we could type this in? Even though we don't even, you can use the fraction key, but there's even an easier way. What do you think, Rosie?
Do you put it over 1?
No, you don't have to put over 1.
Could you just divide it?
Yes. A fraction, remember, is a division. So you type in, let's do it together. 4,000 multiplied by 0.05. And then multiply it by the 4, because it's on top, and then hit divided by 12. So 4,000 times 0.05 times 4 divided by 12. Now this is money, so where do you think we should round it?
100.
Good. So the amount of interest is $66.67. That's the interest. Now what if I said, what's the total amount? What would you do with it?
You add the 4,000 plus.
So it'd be $4,066.67. So just read and see what they ask for, because it could change. All right. You guys try this one, and then I'm going to mix it up a little bit more. We'll do $200 at 6% interest for 18 months. So go ahead and try that one. What'd you get? Jules? 18? Yeah. Yeah, and it did work out that way. I didn't necessarily plan it that way. So we did 200 times 0.06. And then-
I did 1.5
You can do that.
because it's 18, which 12 is 1,
Mm-hmm.
and then 6 is
Because 18 months is a year and a half. 1.5. Yes, that's fine. Or you can just do times 18 divided by 12. And then you have it. So yeah, $18 interest. Okay, so now let's start to work backwards a little bit. So far I've given you the P, the R, the T. Well, let's say I give you the interest, the principal, and the time, but you're missing the rate. And so we're going to set this up in an equation. We're going to use our formula and work towards the rate. So let's take this. Let me give you some information, then we'll work from this. Let's say that John borrows $1,860 to buy a computer. So that's going to be, what would that be? P, R, T, or I?
Principal.
Okay, so that's going to be the principal. That's how much he's going to borrow. And then he's going to pay back $71.30 per month. He pays that much per month. Let's write that 1 meter. For 30 months. And so the question is to find the simple interest rate we're looking for the rate for his loan. Now, let me just kind of walk you guys through this because this is a little bit tricky. Let's start with what we know. We know that the principal is the 1860. Okay, what else do we know that we could use? Like, because we know we've got to eventually get I, we've got the P, we need the R and the T. Hannah?
We know that he's paying $71,000
Okay, good. Now, so we know how much he pays per month. We know how long he's going to pay it. Now, let's think about this. When you pay back a loan, you have to pay the total amount back, right? So you've got to pay back the principal that you borrowed, and you pay your interest. Well, typically what happens is, so you borrow that money, and when you pay it back, they take that total, and you don't just pay your interest first. What do you pay back? Hayden, did you know? Like that monthly payment, is that what's included in that monthly payment? That's
The percentage of the principal.
it's got part of the principal in there and part what? Interest. So they take your total that you have to pay back, and each month you pay a little bit of principal and a little bit of interest. So that $71.30 has some principal, some interest. So that what would happen if he pays it for 30 months? If I take the $71.30 and I multiply that by 30, let's go ahead and just see what that number is.
2,139.
Thank you. Okay, so 2,139. What is that now? What is that amount? What?
Total.
That's the total. Good. And the total includes what two things?
The interest and the principal.
Very good. That's a key really to understanding this problem.
Okay.
Okay, so this equals your total, which is your principal and your interest together. Remember we said that earlier. Because when he pays back $71.30 every month, eventually when he's at the end of his 30 months, he will have paid off his principal and his interest. Does that make sense? It's not like he just pays principal back. He pays them both. All right, so we know that this amount has principal in it and it has interest in it. Well, we know the principal, Hannah?
You subtract it and find the interest.
Very good. So take that total, 2139. If we subtract out, I'm going to move this over here, I think. So 2139 was our total. 271? 79? Good. Yeah, 279. So if I subtract out the principal, which was the 1860, then I'm going to be left with the interest. Kind of. We're going to actually put it into that formula to help us, okay? But so now we have, we already were given the principal. Do you see where we found the interest? We first found the total. We took out the principal, so we were left with the interest. When we do the I equals PRT, we've now found the interest, so let's put that in, 279 under the I. We know the principal, 1860. We don't know the rate. Do we know the time? 30 months, right. So we could put in 30 over 12 so that equals 30/12. Or could we simplify it a little bit? We're going to be using a it might be easier in these kind of reverse problems if it's possible, change it to a decimal. We wouldn't have to. Okay, say it again. Or 15 over 6. Okay, so you divided by 2. Could we divide by anything else? 3, so that'd be 5 over 2. And what's 5 over 2? What decimal would that be? 2.5, right? 2.5, 2.5. And is 30 months 2.5 years? 24 would be 2 years, and then you have 6 left. So in this case, we talked earlier about using the fraction, you could use the fraction, but I think it'll be easier to solve it if you can get it to a decimal. If you can't get it to a decimal, then I'll help you through that, but I don't think you'll have one where you can't. Now, do you know there's an equation with a variable? How do I solve it? How do I find R? What do you think I need to do on this side? Razi?
Multiply 1860 by 2.5.
Very good. Let's simplify the right side because it's 3 things being multiplied, and I can multiply the 2 number parts. So we'll multiply our 1860 times 2.5, and I got 4650. Okay, so it's 4650R is 279. Now what do I do to both sides?
Divide by 1860.
Now when I type that in my calculator, which one do I type in first to simplify this? Not
46.
Not necessarily smaller or larger, but it's the top number. Good, because sometimes you might have a larger number
I'm just saying.
in this problem. Okay, yeah. But I always type in the top divided by the bottom. And what'd you guys get?
6 cents or 6%?
Well, it says 0.06 equals R. Well, what is
That's
R?
right.
R is a rate.
So it's 6%.
So you need to then move your decimal over twice and say it was a 6% interest rate. So we found it. Okay? That's a hard one.
How many questions are there when you get like that?
Not that many. Most of them are going to be the first kind. Okay, let's do one more, and it's on page 371 in your book. So let's grab our books real quick. And this one is in the middle of the page. And we didn't even get to compound interest. Any idea what compound interest might be?
Oh, gosh.
We're not going to do it, but we can. It is interest, but
Two.
Like more than one interest.
well, let's think of when we did like okay, so we earn a certain amount of interest, and it's a yearly. We pay a certain amount each year. Well, do you remember on that very first problem we did? We found out it was like $35 or no, $45 for the first year, and then every year after we still paid $45. Well, with compound, you add it in every year and you get a new principal. Does that make sense? So you have your original principal and you earn interest the first year. So then the second year, your new principal is now
Bigger.
whatever the increase was. So it's actually better in terms of you investing money. You want it to be compounded because your principal gets higher every year. It's not set from the beginning.
So then your interest comes
Yes. And so it's worse when you're paying back a loan, but it's better when you're investing because it's more money. But that's a little bit harder to find, so we're just going to do simple. All right, so let's look at the middle of the page, number 2, about savings. And this will be our last one. All right, so it says, suppose Nantai placed $2,400 in the bank for 5 years. He makes $9.20 in interest each month. Find the annual interest rate. If we had more time, I'd probably have you guys work on it individually, but because we only have 5 minutes, we'll go ahead and start to talk through it. So let's identify what we have. What information have we given? Just
The principal, the time,
Okay.
and the rate.
do we have the
I mean,
rate?
not the rate, the interest.
Amount of interest, okay. But that's each month, correct? Okay, so we know that the principal's $2,400. I heard you say we were given the time. Is it in months or years? Years, which is nice, because that's where we need to be thinking in years. And then we mentioned we were given interest, but it's the interest per month, and we need to get this to, well, how many months is he actually paying? Very good, Izzy. So he's paying $9.20, but that's per month. And Izzy, where'd you get 60?
Because there's 12 months in a year and she paid for 5 months.
Very good. 5 times 12 equals 60 months. And because that's a monthly interest, and he's going to pay it for 60 months, I need to multiply it by 60 to find out how much the total interest would be.
550.
Okay, good. So that's the amount of interest that he's going to pay at the end of those 5 years. This one's a little bit easier. Is that everybody okay with that? Okay, so now we're still missing, though, the rate. So let's go to that formula for interest. I equals PRT. We'll plug in. We now know our interest is $552. And we know the principal. We don't know the rate. And now, for the time, do I use 5 or 60?
5.
Because when you plug it into this formula, we're talking yearly. Okay, we only use the 60 because the interest was given per month. Okay, now go ahead and solve it. What should your first step be?
Multiply 2,400.
Good. You should get 12,000 R.
Yes.
And then, Hillary, what do we do to both sides at that point? Well, we're just trying to get R by itself. So how do I undo multiplying by 12,000? And I would encourage you to use your calculator, but write down, you're still writing everything down as you go. You're just not having to do these multiplying and dividing parts. Okay?
That'd be terrible.
It would take a little while. So, because I want you to practice the method, you should know how to multiply and divide at this point. So how do I type that in? What do I type in first, Ashna?
550.
Very good. So I have written down 0.046. Is that rounded? Or is that just where it stopped?
That's just where it stopped.
Okay. So is that the answer?
No.
Very good. So the rate is 4.6%. Okay? Good work. This will be due tomorrow, but use your calculators, otherwise it'll take you too long.
No seconds.